So as we look into why World War II happened, we have to look back at World War I and remember how truly horrible it was. Western powers such as Britain and France simply did not want to go through that again and would avoid total war at all costs. However, with the rise of fascism and totalitarianism in Europe, many of these fascist leaders such as Mussolini and Hitler realized they could take advantage of this tendency to not go to war, and they could expand their own territory. Now, the first instance of this is not actually in Europe, it's in Asia with Japan. By the 1930s, Japan had been taken over by ultranationalists, and they thought that they should have an empire equal to those of the Western powers. In order to pursue this goal, they seized Manchuria in 1931. That's part of China. Now, the League of Nations condemned this aggression, but Japan simply withdrew from the organization in response. And by 1937, they had overran much of eastern China. And this actually started a war between China and Japan. But the Western protests did not stop Japan. In around 1935, Mussolini's Italy decides to invade Ethiopia, which is located in northeastern Africa. The Ethiopians resisted bravely, but their outdated weapons were simply no match for Mussolini's tanks, machine guns, poisonous gas, and airplanes. And while the Ethiopian king appealed to the League of Nations for help, Italy kind of took a page out of Japan's book and left. By 1936, and Italy had conquered Ethiopia. Now we can focus on Hitler. Hitler tested the will of Western democracies and found it to be weak. And he did that by building up the German military in defiance of the Versailles Treaty. And then in 1936, he sent troops into the demilitarized Rhineland bordering France. And France and Britain did nothing. And this policy of doing nothing, that's what is known as appeasement, or giving in to the demands of an aggressor in order to keep the peace. Now, like I said, they did this for a couple reasons. Number one, they were afraid of getting into another major war. Secondly, we had the Great Depression that was going on, so countries were suffering not only from economic downturns, but also political divisions. And we also had this rise of pacifism. Pacifism is the opposition to all war. And so these reasons listed are reasons why appeasement seemed like a good option for the French and the British. Now, at the same time, the United States wanted nothing to do with war either. In the mid-1930s, they passed a series of neutrality acts, which forbade the sale of arms to any nation at war. As well as outlawing loans to warring nations and prohibiting Americans from traveling on ships of warring powers. The fundamental goal of the American policy was to avoid involvement in the European war. It wasn't necessarily to prevent such a conflict. We just wanted nothing to do with this. Now, in the face of this apparent weakness of Britain, France, and the United States, Germany, Italy, and Japan formed what became known as the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis. And they were also known as the Axis powers, and they agreed to fight Soviet communism, and they also agreed not to interfere with one another's plans for territorial expansion. And this agreement cleared the way for these anti-democratic aggressor powers to take even bolder steps.